Good evening, sleepless traveler. You've made it through another long day, and now it's time to let go of everything waiting outside your door. This is your moment to rest, to set the world aside, and to let your mind drift into something old, strange, and comforting. Tonight, we step into the shadows of autumn, where the nights grow longer, the fires burn brighter, and the veil between the living and the dead grows thin. This is not just a bedtime story. It is a journey back to the oldest roots of Halloween, long before costumes and candy, back when it was a night of fire, masks, and sacrifice. Close your door, settle into your bed, feel the weight of the blankets. Let your body sink deeper into stillness with every breath. Settle into the quiet. Blink your eyes slowly 10 times and let grow heavy. If you listen closely, you may still hear the echo of those ancient nights, the crackle of the bonfire, the whisper of spirits at the edge of the dark, and the turning of a wheel that has never stopped. This is Boring History for Sleep, the pagan origins of Halloween. But before your eyes grow heavy, I have one small request. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll always have another story waiting for you on nights like this. If you're ready, then let's step together into the quiet shadows of history and uncover the night when the world between the living and the dead grew thin. Are you ready? Then let us begin. It was a night colder than any the people could remember. The harvest was finished, the fields stripped bare, and the bonfire rose like a pillar of flame against the endless dark. Families huddled together at its edge, clutching cloaks close to their skin. For on this night, it was said, the boundary between the living and the dead was no stronger than a breath on glass. Shadows moved at the tree line. Not animals, not men. Shapes that flickered as though born from the smoke itself. Mothers pressed children to their skirts. Fathers gripped torches tighter, though they knew fire could not truly hold back what wandered tonight. And then it happened. A shriek pierced the night. Not human, not animal, but something older, something from beyond. The crowd froze. Out of the shifting black came a figure, cloaked and crowned with antlers, face hidden by a mask carved from wood. None knew if it was a man, a spirit, or something that had crawled up from the mounds. The firelight danced across its mask as it raised a hand. Behind it, the shapes grew clearer, pale faces, hollow-eyed, drifting closer. Some swore they saw their dead kin among them, long-buried fathers, lost daughters, brothers who had drowned seasons ago. The living and the dead were mingling. The veil was breaking. The figure moved forward, slow but steady, until it stood before the flames. The people waited, every breath caught, every heart racing. The masked one lowered its head toward the fire, and in that moment, every soul gathered felt the same truth. This was not just a festival. This was survival. But before anyone could move, the wind shifted. Sparks shot high into the night sky, and the bonfire roared as though answering the figure's call. The dead shapes swayed with it, caught in a tide the villagers could not see. Some children screamed, others tried to run, only to be pulled back by frantic hands. And then the figure's mask turned toward them. the hollow eyes of carved wood fixed on the crowd. Was it blessing them? Cursing them? Calling them forward to join the ranks of the Pale? No one knew. But one thing was certain. Halloween, though they did not yet call it that, had begun not as a night of games, but as a battle between the living and the darkness that pressed on every side. The people waited for the figure to speak. The fire cracked, shadows writhed, and the night held its breath. And then the figure lifted its hand a second time, and the bonfire collapsed inward with a sound like the sky tearing apart. The bonfire fell with a thunderous crack, sending sparks and embers into the blackened sky. The crowd gasped as fire that had been a tower of light only moments ago scattered into a storm of glowing fragments. For a heartbeat, the night went dark. No shield, no beacon, just the endless void of winter pressing in. Then came the sound. It was not the crackle of firewood, nor the hiss of burning straw. It was a murmur, 1,000 voices whispering all at once, rising from the pile of cinders where the flames had been. Some voices were low and mournful, others high and sharp, like laughter carried on the wind. But all of them were familiar. One woman screamed as she heard her mother's voice, dead 3 winters. A man dropped to his knees when his brother called his name, though that brother had been buried in the hills long ago. The air was alive with the dead, each ember a tongue, each puff of smoke a soul. The masked figure did not flinch. It stepped closer to the wreckage, as though this collapse had been part of some design. It raised its antlered crown high, and the whispers grew clearer. Not only whispers now, words, pleas, warnings, promises. "Cold comes," said one. "Blood must pay," said another. "Hide your faces, they are watching," croaked a third. The people began to panic. Children sobbed. The elders muttered prayers, old and broken phrases in a language only the Druids remembered. Some clutched charms, little bones carved with runes, shaking them at the smoke as if to ward it away. But the masked figure raised its arm, silencing the crowd with a single motion. The whispers stilled, hushed, as though held in check by unseen reins. And then finally, it spoke. Its voice was not entirely human. Deep, hollow, carried on the wind like a chant rising from the earth itself. The wheel has turned. The light is gone. The dark has claimed its half. And now the hungry cross the veil. The crowd shuddered as one. The hungry. That was the word their ancestors had whispered for centuries. Spirits not of kindness, but of need. Those who crossed the veil not to visit, but to take. They came for warmth, for food, for flesh. The masked figure looked across the gathered villagers, eyes of carved wood glinting with reflected sparks. "If you wish to live," it said slowly, "you must give them what they seek." The people held their breath. What did it mean? What offering? What sacrifice? The ashes hissed, curling upward into shapes, faces of the dead, jaws wide as though waiting to be fed. The air grew heavy, pressing on their chests. Something was coming. And then, from the cinders of the fallen fire, a hand shot upward, pale, skeletal, clawing its way from the ash. The first of the hungry had arrived.
The hand twitched, scattering ash as it pulled upward. Fingers long and crooked like roots tore through the cinders, reaching for the air as though desperate for breath. The villagers stumbled back, pressing into one another, but no one screamed now. They were past screaming. They were caught in the grip of silence, every eye fixed on the thing that clawed its way free. With a slow, grinding sound, the rest of it followed. A skull-like face rose from the embers, its hollow sockets glowing faintly with the red of dying coals. Its body was thin, brittle, draped in rags of smoke. When it opened its mouth, the sound was a low moan, stretched and endless, like the wind groaning through a cavern. The masked figure did not move. It only watched. The creature dragged itself forward, and as it did, others began to rise behind it. More hands, more faces, pulling free from the ash where the bonfire had collapsed. One by one they emerged, pale, empty-eyed, hungry. A boy clutched his father's arm. "Dad! It's Uncle!" His voice trembled. The father stared harder, and indeed, though the skin was gone and the eyes hollow, he could see the likeness, the curve of the jaw, the scar at the brow. The dead had returned, but twisted, warped into creatures that no longer belonged. The whispers rose again. "Feed us," the voices said. "Feed us or be taken." At this, panic broke. One man turned and ran into the darkness, sprinting towards the safety of his hut. But he did not make it far. The first hungry one lunged, not with the speed of a beast, but with a strange, jerking motion, as though the world itself had bent around it. In an instant it was upon him. The villagers shrieked as the man was dragged down. The creature bent over him, and his cries were swallowed in a chorus of whispers. When the thing rose again, the man was nothing more than smoke, dissolving into the air. The crowd stumbled back, crying out prayers, calling to the gods of fire and earth. But the masked figure raised his hand once more. Its voice, when it spoke, cut through the chaos like iron. "Do not run. Running feeds their hunger. Only gifts will satisfy them." "What gifts?" shouted an elder, her voice cracking with fear. The masks turned slowly toward her, antlers catching what little glow remained in the sky. "Yours to choose, yours to give. But the wheel turns, and the dark must be honored." The people trembled. Did it mean food? Did it mean their animals? Or did it mean themselves? The hungry ones crept closer, their mouths opening wider, as though ready to swallow not just flesh, but light, breath, warmth itself. And then the boy who had spoken earlier, who had said the first creature looked like his uncle, slipped from his father's grasp and stepped forward. The hungry ones turned their hollow eyes toward him. The crowd gasped as the boy walked forward. His small feet left prints in the ash, each step strangely steady, as though he were no longer afraid. The villagers reached out, calling his name, but none dared run to him. The creatures had formed a circle, pale faces tilted toward the child, their whispers weaving like threads through the night. His father staggered forward, arm outstretched. "Come back, lad!" His voice cracked with terror, but the boy didn't look back. Instead, he lifted something from the ground, an old wooden toy horse, scorched black from the fallen embers. He had carried it everywhere since he was little, a gift from his uncle, the very uncle whose hollow-eyed shape now stood among the hungry ones. The boy knelt and placed the toy in the ashes.
For a moment, nothing happened. The villagers held their breath, waiting for the creatures to strike. Then, the nearest figure, the one that had once been his uncle, moved. It bent low, bones creaking, and reached for the toy. Its long fingers closed around it. The whispers quieted, and a strange stillness settled over the clearing. The creature lifted the toy horse to its empty face. For the briefest instant, a flicker of something human passed through its sockets. Recognition. Memory. A sound rose from its throat, not the endless moan of hunger, but something almost like a sigh. The villagers dared to hope. But hope is a fragile thing. The creature crushed the toy in its hand, splintering the wood to dust. The whispers swelled again, louder, hungrier, and this time they were directed not at the crowd, but at the boy himself. The father cried out and lunged forward, breaking the circle. He grabbed his son, yanking him back into his arms. But as he did, the creatures surged forward as one. Their mouths opened wide, spilling streams of smoke and ember. The villagers screamed and scattered. And then, just as the pale hands reached for the boy, the masked figure stepped between them. The antlers loomed, shadowed and terrible. With a sweep of its arm, fire erupted in a circle around the father and son, cutting off the creatures. Sparks rained down like falling stars. "Not him," the masked figure said. Its voice was final, cold, and yet it carried something almost like mercy. The creatures recoiled from the fire, hissing, their whispers sharp and angry. The masked figure turned slowly to the crowd. "You see now, the dead remember, but remembrance is not enough. They will not leave with trinkets. They will not leave with tears. They demand more." The villagers froze, every face pale as bone. "What more?" the elder demanded, though her voice shook. The figure lifted its mask just slightly, just enough for the people to glimpse the shadow beneath. And in that moment, every torch guttered, every ember dimmed. The night itself seemed to lean closer. "What they demand," the figure whispered, "is flesh." The clearing had gone deathly quiet. Only the low hiss of the fire ring and the restless whispers of the hungry ones filled the silence. The masked figure's words hung in the night air, heavier than smoke. They demand flesh. The villagers trembled. Some clutched their children. Others pressed their hands to their mouths as if to keep their own fear from escaping. Eyes darted between one another. Who would be chosen? Who would be given? The elder's voice, frail yet unyielding, broke the silence. "We will not feed them our own." The masked figure tilted its head slowly, antlers casting jagged shadows across the crowd. "Then you will watch them take, one by one, until none remain." As if to prove the words, a creature lunged at the fire's edge. The flames flared, holding it back, but the heat wavered, weakening. The whispers swelled like waves crashing against the shore. The father who had rescued his son held the boy tighter, stepping backward into the crowd. Others did the same, each clutching their loved ones, unwilling to meet their neighbor's eyes. Then, from the back, a voice rang out, harsh, bitter. "Take him!" The crowd turned. It was a broad-shouldered man, face hard as stone. His hand pointed straight at the father and son. The boy tempted them. He walked to them. "He's marked. Give him, and they may leave us be." The father's face drained of blood. "You dare!"
But before he could speak again, another village's voice rose, then another. Murmurs spread like fire through dry grass. Fear twisted into anger, survival into blame. The elder raised her staff, slamming it into the ground. "Silence! None here shall condemn a child." The whispers grew louder, as though mocking her words. The hungry ones pressed closer against the fire's circle, their faces leering. Smoke rose from their mouths, forming the shapes of grasping hands. The masked figure's voice slid through the chaos, calm and cruel. "It matters not who, only that there is one. Blood for peace, flesh for silence." The villagers turned on each other now, shouting, accusing. Old grudges rose to the surface, neighbors snarling at neighbors. The father held his son and edged back, but the circle was closing in, not the circle of the dead, but of the living. And then, the elder raised her staff high. "Enough! If blood is to be given, it will not be a child's. It will be mine." The crowd fell silent, shocked. The father's mouth opened, but no words came. The boy buried his face into his father's chest. The elder stepped toward the fire's edge, her white hair glowing in the flames, her eyes fixed on the masked figure. "Let them take me. Let my death keep the rest alive." The villagers watched, frozen, as she walked closer. The fire seemed to bend toward her, lowering as though it too listened. The hungry ones swayed, their hollow eyes burning brighter. The whispers sharpened, eager. The elder crossed the fire ring, and the creatures reached out their hands. The elder's sandals sank into the ash as she stepped beyond the fire. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to hold still. The villagers watched with wide, wet eyes, their breath caught in their throats. Even the father clutched his son tighter, unable to move, unable to speak. The hungry ones leaned forward, hands stretching like pale branches in the dark. Their whispers rose in pitch until they became almost a chant. "Feed us, feed us, feed us." The elder lifted her staff and struck it into the ground one final time. "If it is flesh you crave, then take mine. Let the living be spared." The first of the creatures stepped forward. It was the uncle-shaped thing, its empty eyes burning faintly as it reached for her. For a moment, she lifted her hand and touched its cold, skeletal face. "I remember you, child," she whispered, voice steady. Then its mouth opened wide, wider than any human mouth could, until the jaw split unnaturally. Smoke poured out like a tide. The elder did not flinch. She stood firm as the creature's hand pressed against her chest. And then, in a rush, her body withered. Flesh sank inward, skin shriveling to parchment, hair turning to ash. Her eyes dimmed, but her lips curved into something almost like a smile, as if she had found peace in the giving. The villagers gasped and fell to their knees. The boy buried his face into his father's cloak, sobbing. When the creature stepped back, the elder was gone. Only her staff remained, charred and blackened, lying in the ashes. The whispers died down. The hungry one swayed, retreating a step. For the first time since the fire had burned out, the clearing was almost quiet. The masked figure spread its arms. "It is done. The dark is honored. You will see another dawn." A sigh of relief spread through the villagers. Some wept openly. Others held each other, whispering thanks to the elder's name. The father pressed a kiss to his son's hair, trembling with gratitude and grief all at once. But the peace did not last, because as the villagers began to rise, one by one, the hungry ones did not fade. They did not sink back into the earth. They remained, watching, waiting. And then the whispers rose again, harsher, hungrier than before. More, more, more. The villagers' relief shattered like glass. The father looked up, eyes wide. The boy clutched his arm. The masked figure's head tilted, and though its expression was hidden, the voice carried something almost like amusement. They have tasted, and once tasted, the dead will not stop. The whispers turned into a roar, not a human sound, but 1,000 voices crying out at once, shrill and guttural, as though the very earth was screaming through the mouths of the dead.
Villagers clutched their ears, some collapsing into the ash. The boy wailed, his voice lost in the storm. Then the fire ring cracked. A burst of sparks shot upward as the flames bent inward, no longer a barrier but a path. The hungry ones surged forward, pale bodies twisting unnaturally, their movements jerking like puppets pulled on invisible strings. The villagers scattered, screams rising into the night. Some fled toward the fields, others back to their huts, but the creatures were faster, appearing in front of them, behind them, as though shadows themselves had grown teeth. One woman fell as a creature seized her arm. Her husband grabbed her hand, pulling, but the creature's grip was stronger. Her body dissolved in a cloud of smoke, her scream cut off as though swallowed whole. Her husband staggered backward, clutching only the ragged scrap of her shawl. The father clutched his son and ran, shoving past neighbors, heart hammering like a drum. He didn't know where he was going, only away from the circle, away from the whispers. But no matter how far he ran, the voices followed, echoing inside his skull. Feed us, feed us. Behind him, the masked figure stood motionless at the fire's edge. Its antlers gleamed in the light of the chaos, watching, always watching. The elder's staff lay in the ashes where she had fallen. The flames licked at it, then guttered and died. Darkness rolled in like a tide. The father stumbled to a halt in the blackness, clutching his son against his chest. Around him, the cries of the villagers grew fewer, swallowed by the hungry ones. His breath came in ragged gasps, each one clouding in the cold. Then, silence. He turned slowly. The whispers had stopped. The screams had ceased. The field was empty. Too empty. And then he saw them. Dozens of faces, pale and hollow-eyed, staring at him through the dark. The villagers, his neighbors, his friends, all of them. Their bodies still smoldered faintly, as though the fire had remade them. The hungry ones were no longer just the dead. They were the newly taken, and they were closing in. The father's breath tore through his throat as he staggered backward, clutching his son. The faces advancing through the dark were not strangers anymore. They were his neighbors, his kin, men and women he had laughed with at harvest feasts, children his son had played beside. Now their mouths hung open in a hollow hunger, smoke spilling like breath from a furnace. Their voices merged into one, "Feed us, feed us." The father turned and ran, his feet pounded against the earth, each step slipping in the thick carpet of ash. The boy clung to his neck, trembling, eyes wide with terror. Behind them, the sound of pursuit was wrong. Not the rhythm of footsteps, but a scraping, a dragging, as though bones themselves were clawing forward. Every few moments, the whispers surged closer, brushing the back of his mind. He stumbled over a root, nearly falling. The boy cried out. The father forced himself onward, lungs burning, legs shaking. Ahead, the faint outline of the forest loomed, trees blackened against the night sky. If he could reach the trees, maybe, just maybe. But the first of the new hungry ones burst into his path. It was the broad-shouldered man, the very one who had demanded the boy be given. His face was still recognizable, though stretched too thin, lips peeled back in a rictus grin. He raised his hands, fingers crooked like claws. The father skidded to a stop, clutching his son tighter. The hollow eyes burned, and from his mouth came that single word, echoing with the voices of many. Feed. The father stumbled backward, heart hammering. Then he heard it, the boy's voice in his ear, barely a whisper. Da, it's me they want. If I go, they'll stop. The father froze, tears burning his eyes. He shook his head violently. No, never. You hear me? Never. But as the horde closed in, their pale shapes circling, their whispers building to a frenzy, doubt gnawed at him. Could he save his son by giving him up? Could he save himself? Could he save anyone? And then, the night split open. A blast of fire tore across the field, hurling the creatures back in a spray of sparks. The masked figure stepped through the smoke, antlers catching the red glow, cloak trailing behind like a shadow given form. Its voice rang out, cutting through the chaos. The boy is not theirs to claim. Not yet. The creatures recoiled, hissing, smoke boiling from their mouths. The father clutched his son, staring up at the figure, torn between fear and desperate gratitude. But before he could speak, the masked figure turned its hidden face toward him. You cannot run forever, it said. The wheel turns, and the choice must be made. Flesh will bind them, or flesh will free them. The words struck like iron, heavy and terrible. The father didn't understand, but he knew the figure was not offering salvation. It was offering a bargain. The hungry ones howled, their voices rising again, pressing closer. The fire would not hold forever, and the father knew a choice was coming. The father stood trembling, his arms locked around the boy as though his grip alone could keep the night at bay. The masked figure loomed before him, firelight flickering across the curve of its antlers. Behind them, the hungry ones pressed against the flames, their whispers growing sharper, impatient. The wheel turns, the figure said again, voice low and steady. And flesh will bind them, or flesh will free them. The father's throat worked. What do you mean? Speak plain. The figure's head tilted, the mask catching a dull red glow. The dead hunger, because they are untethered. They claw at the living to taste what they've lost. Offer them a life freely given, and they will bind themselves to silence for a time. The boy stirred, his small voice breaking the night. He means me, duh. The father's heart clenched. He held the boy tighter. No, not you, not ever. The masked figure raised a long hand, fingers pale against the firelight. There is another path. Blood taken, not given. A sacrifice of will, not love. One among you slain, not chosen. Such a death frees the horde, loosens them into the world without anchor. The father's head spun. So, either we give them one, or unleash them all. The figure's voice dropped to a whisper, though every villager left in earshot seemed to hear it inside their bones. That is the choice of flesh. The boy buried his face in his father's chest. Around them, the surviving villagers stirred, faces ghostly pale in the red glow. Whispers passed from mouth to mouth, too faint to catch, but heavy with dread. Then the broad-shouldered man, the one already taken, staggered forward from the horde. His face twisted, eyes burning like embers. Smoke leaked from his mouth as he rasped, "Choose, or we will." The father's knees nearly buckled. He stared at the circle of pale faces, at his son's trembling form, and at the masked figure, standing tall and unmoving. The fire hissed low, thinning, its glow fading. The boy looked up at him, eyes shining with tears. I'm not afraid." The father's breath caught. He wanted to scream, to run, to tear the night apart, but all he could do was stand, crushed by the weight of a choice that would decide not just his son's fate, but the fate of them all. And then a scream split the air. A villager, a young woman, was dragged from the crowd by pale hands. She fought, clawing at the earth, her cries slicing through the dark. The hungry ones yanked her toward their circle, their mouths opening wide. The father lunged forward, but it was too late. With a sound like 1,000 breaths drawn at once, she was consumed. Her body dissolved into smoke, her screams snuffed out. When the smoke cleared, her face was among them, another hungry one. The father's heart broke. The choice had not yet been made, but the dead were choosing for themselves. The fire circle hissed lower, its embers barely keeping back the tide of whispers. The air was thick with smoke and dread, every breath heavy as ash. The father clutched his son, unwilling to move, unwilling to decide, but the villagers around him were no longer still. "They'll take us all if we don't choose," one man shouted, eyes wild. "Then let it be him," another cried, pointing directly at the boy. The father staggered back, rage flaring hot in his chest. "You'll not lay a hand on him!" The crowd surged closer, desperation burning in their eyes. Faces that had once shared his bread and ale were now twisted with terror, their gazes fixed on the small, trembling figure in his arms. An older woman raised her voice above the clamor. The masked one said a life freely given would bind them. If the child goes willingly, it will save us all. The father's jaw clenched. He saw the way his boy's lips trembled, how he tried to stand tall despite the tears streaking his cheeks. The thought alone nearly broke him. Then a man shoved forward, torch raised high. "If the father won't give him, we'll take him." The crowd roared, half in agreement, half in protest. Neighbors shouted at one another, pushing, striking, tearing at clothes. The village had become a pit of snarling animals, all teeth and terror. The masked figure remained motionless, a shadow behind the chaos, antlers glinting faintly in the dark, watching, always watching. The father backed toward the tree line, son pressed close to his chest. His mind raced, every instinct screaming to run, to hide. But where could he go? The horde was everywhere. The villagers were against him, and the fire's protection was fading fast. Suddenly, the crowd parted with a scream. A man had been dragged to the ground, pale hands clamping around his ankles. He kicked, clawed, howled, but the hungry ones yanked him into the smoke. His cries broke into silence, and when the mist cleared, his face glared back among the horde. The villagers froze. For a heartbeat,
The entire world was still. Then panic exploded again, louder than before. "It's him or all of us," someone shouted, pointing at the boy. "No, it should be the father. He's the one cursed," another spat. "The gods will take whoever we give them." Hands reached for the child. The father swung wildly, striking one away, shoving another back. His breath was ragged, his vision blurred by rage and smoke. He felt the boy clutch his neck, whispering in his ear, "Don't let go, Da, please." And then the crowd surged again, a tide of grasping hands and desperate faces. The father's grip tightened on the boy. His body braced for the clash. He would not give him up, not while breath still burned in his chest. But deep in the smoke, the whispers rose into a scream. The hungry ones were growing impatient. The fire was dying. The choice could not be avoided much longer. The night split with screams as the mob surged. Hands clawed at the father's cloak, torches swung wild in the smoke, and the boy shrieked as rough fingers scraped at his arm. "No!" the father roared, striking out with desperate fury. His fist connected with the jaw, sending a man sprawling, but more pressed in, eyes glinting with madness. The villagers were no longer neighbors. They were executioners. The father spun, shielding the boy with his body. A stone cracked against his shoulder, nearly dropping him to his knees. Torches licked too close, heat searing his face. His grip on his son was all that kept him upright. Then, boom! The ground shuddered. A column of fire erupted at the center of the circle, higher than any pyre had ever burned. Villagers stumbled back, blinded by the blaze. Shadows writhed across their faces, long and terrible. From the fire stepped the masked figure. The antlers glowed red, each point crowned with flame. Its voice rolled over the chaos, deeper than thunder, sharper than a blade. Enough! The villagers froze, their rage extinguished in an instant. All eyes turned to the figure as it lifted its staff, the air crackling with power. The hungry ones hissed, drawing back from the sudden light, their whispers twisting into shrieks of pain. The figure pointed the staff toward the father. "The wheel demands a life, one freely given or one freely taken." It turned slowly, the mask sweeping across the crowd. "But it shall not be chosen by rabble. The fire will decide." Confusion rippled through the villagers. "The fire," one whispered. The figure slammed the staff against the earth. Sparks shot outward, racing across the ground like snakes of light. They coiled around the feet of the father, the boy, and 3 villagers who had shouted loudest for blood. The flames flared, forming a ring around them. 5 figures trapped in firelight, the rest of the village watching with wide, horrified eyes. The father's stomach sank. He clutched the boy tighter. "What are you doing?" he demanded. The masked figure's voice echoed like a judgment. "The fire will take its due. One will burn, and the wheel will turn." The boy whimpered, burying his face in his father's chest. The villagers screamed, some begging the figure for mercy, others urging the fire to take the child, their voices cracking with desperation. The father's knees weakened. Around him, the ring of flame burned higher, cutting off escape. Smoke stung his eyes, heat licked his skin, and the whispers of the hungry ones grew frantic, pressing against the barrier. One would burn. One would bind the horde, and the fire had already chosen its circle. The ring of fire roared higher, sealing them in. Heat rolled off it in suffocating waves, pressing sweat from their skin. Sparks swirled like angry spirits, snapping in the smoke-choked air. The father staggered back, clutching his boy close. Across from him, 3 villagers, faces twisted with panic, tried to stamp the flames down, but each touch of the fire only flared brighter, as if mocking their efforts. The masked figure loomed just beyond the circle, its antlers shimmering with living embers. The hollow eyes of the mask glowed. "One must burn," it intoned. "The fire will not release you until the chosen life is given." The boy whimpered, burying his face against his father's chest. "Papa, I don't want to burn." The father's heart thundered in his ribs. He bent low, whispering fiercely, "I won't let them touch you. Do you hear me? I won't." But the villagers trapped with them were unraveling. One man, his eyes rolling white with terror, turned toward the boy. "It should be him," he spat, voice cracking. "The child was marked. It's the child the fire wants." The father shoved him back with a snarl, nearly losing his balance in the dust. "Come near him, and I'll send you into the flames myself." The mob outside screamed approval, voices clashing. Some demanded the child, others howled for mercy. The entire village had become a single fractured beast, its many mouths snapping and frothing. The flames shifted. They began to crawl inward, inch by inch, the circle tightening. No longer still, the fire moved like a living predator, closing in on its prey. The second villager, a woman, hair plastered to her face with sweat, fell to her knees. "Please," she cried to the masked figure, take me instead." The fire hesitated, the ring stilling for the briefest breath. Hope flickered across her face. Then, with a deafening roar, the flames lunged. They wrapped her in a column of fire, swallowing her screams. The smell of burning flesh choked the air, and the circle sealed again, as though nothing had changed. The father gagged, clutching the boy tighter as the ashes settled. Only 4 remained inside the ring. The masked figure's voice cut through the horror. "One is not enough. The wheel must drink deeper." The villagers outside howled, some collapsing in fear, others chanting mindless words to keep their courage alive. The whispers of the hungry ones rose. 100 voices pressed against the walls of reality, begging for release. The father's knees buckled. The boy sobbed into his chest, and the 2 surviving villages stared at him with wild, cornered eyes, like wolves who knew only one of them would leave alive. The circle of fire tightened again. The choice was no longer distant. It was at his throat. The circle of fire tightened. The heat pressed against their skin like claws, smoke stinging their eyes. The boy clung to his father, trembling so violently he could barely breathe. The 2 remaining villagers, faces streaked with soot, madness gleaming in their eyes, snarled at one another like beasts. One lunged, tackling the other into the dirt. They rolled, fists flying, curses spilling, as the fire crept closer. The father stood frozen, clutching the boy, his heart hammered against his ribs, a terrible truth taking shape in his mind. The fire would not stop until his son was gone. "Papa," the boy whimpered, "please, I'm scared." The father's knees buckled, his arms shook as he held the child tighter, tighter, as though he could squeeze the terror out of him. But in his gut, he knew every choice was death. Either the boy burned, or the fire would take them all. The villagers' struggle ended in a shriek. One body slammed into the flames, igniting like dry straw. The other staggered up, blood streaming down his face, only to be swallowed by fire that leapt eagerly to claim him. The father turned away, shielding the boy from the sight. Their screams cut short, leaving silence. Then, just silence. The masked figure stepped closer, its antlers dripping embers, its shadow cast long and terrible. "The fire has not been satisfied," it said. "One more must burn. The wheel turns only with blood." The father's breath came ragged. His arms trembled around his son. He looked down into the boy's tear-streaked face, and in that instant he knew what must be done. Slowly, he lowered the boy to the ground. "Stay here," he whispered, voice breaking. "Close your eyes. Don't open them until the fire's gone." The boy's eyes widened. "No! Papa, no!" But the father cupped his face, forcing a smile through his tears. "I promised you, I won't let it take you." Before the boy could cling to him, the father stood and walked toward the fire. His steps were steady now, as if some terrible peace had settled in his chest. The circle flared brighter with each pace, sparks leaping like hounds scenting blood. The masked figure tilted its head, watching. At the edge of the flames, the father paused. He turned back one last time, his gaze locking with his son's. His lips moved, shaping words the boy could not hear over the roar. Then he stepped into the fire. It rose up to meet him, engulfing him in an instant. His scream tore through the night, then choked to silence. The flames howled, towering higher, splitting the sky with a pillar of red light. The ground trembled. The hungry whispers shrieked in agony, then fell quiet. One by one, the unseen watchers faded, their grasp broken. And then, darkness. The fire collapsed into ash. The circle vanished. The boy crouched, trembling in the soot, alone. The masked figure stood over him, silent. For a long, breathless moment, it simply stared. Then it raised its staff, tapped the earth once, and the fire within its antlers guttered out. Its voice was softer now, but still edged with iron. "The wheel has turned, the debt is paid, until next harvest." With that, it melted into the night, leaving only shadows and silence. The boy sat amid the ashes, staring at the empty space where his father had stood. Above him the sky was impossibly still, no whispers, no fire, only the hush of the forest and the weight of a sacrifice no one would ever speak of again. And somewhere, unseen, the wheel waited for its next turn.
And so the boy sat alone in the ashes. His father's sacrifice lingered only in smoke and silence. The masked figure was gone. The whispers of the hungry ones had been pushed back beyond the veil. All that remained was the hush of the autumn night. But, in truth, stories like this one are not so far from what our ancestors believed. Long before Halloween became a night of
costumes, candy, and pumpkins glowing in suburban windows. It was something far older, something heavier. The Celts, who lived across Ireland, Scotland, and parts of Britain 2,000 years ago, celebrated a night called Samhain. It marked the end of the harvest and the start of the dark half of the year. They believed that on this night the veil between the living and the dead grew thin. Spirits could slip into the world of men, and not all of them came in peace. To guard themselves, the Celts lit great bonfires. They sacrificed animals, and perhaps, though we cannot know for certain, sometimes even people. Flames were seen as both a shield and a bridge to the other world. Just like in our story, fire was the force that held the restless dead at bay. Masks and disguises, too, were part of this ritual. People wore them so the spirits would mistake them for fellow ghosts and leave them unharmed. When you picture that antlered mask from our tale, remember it echoes this ancient practice. Costume as protection, costume as survival. Centuries later, when Christianity spread across Europe, the Church folded these beliefs into its own calendar. Samhain became the eve of All Saints' Day, or All Hallows' Eve, which, said quickly enough, turned into Halloween. And so, what was once a night of fear, fire, and sacrifice slowly softened. Over time, it became a night of games, lanterns carved from turnips, and children going door to door for sweets. The terror dulled, but the bones of those old traditions are still there, hidden under the laughter. The fire has always been with us. Once it roared in sacred hillsides to keep spirits at bay. Now it flickers in the candles of carved pumpkins. Once masks were worn to confuse the dead. Now they're worn for play. Once sacrifices were made in blood. Now we offer chocolate and candy. The wheel turns. It always has. And so, as you drift now into sleep, remember that Halloween is more than costumes and sugar. It is a night with deep roots, a night when people once believed the other world brushed against our own. The fire has dimmed, yes, but its glow has never truly gone out. Sleep well and let the wheel turn gently until morning.